So we're going to be experiencing our autumn equinox in a couple days, on the 20th of March to be specific. The autumn equinox occurs on the 20th of March. This year we have it at 11:37 a.m. South African Standard Time. So in honor of it and in celebration of it, I'd like to do a quick breakdown of what it is exactly and how to align with it, what makes it important, why we should know about it, why we should understand it, and how it is that we can align with it. Because if you watch my videos, you know that I'm really big on alignment. It's the most fundamental lesson that I'm always learning from my ancestors, from my guides, from my teachers, from nature, because ultimately nothing can be achieved when one is out of alignment. So the autumn equinox, put as simply as possible, is the first day of the autumn season. The autumn equinox for us in the southern hemisphere is when the sun crosses the equator, moving from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. While we're having our autumn equinox, the northern hemisphere is simultaneously having their spring equinox, their new year. It's the first day of autumn for us and the first day of spring for them, which makes it their new year, the true new year. Just as our true new year is technically on the 22nd of September, or the 21st to the 23rd, between that period, depending on the year. Their new year is on the 20th of March, on their spring equinox, because the beginning of spring marks the beginning of a new year. Historically, the northern hemisphere always celebrated their new year on the 20th of March before Julius Caesar changed it, along with a bunch of other changes that he made to the calendar to suit his own agenda. And of course, Africa is always dragged into whatever nonsense is happening in first world countries, so we now also celebrate our new year on the 1st of January, even though it makes no sense technically, scientifically, or spiritually. After he made the changes, New Year was no longer celebrated on the 20th of March in the Northern Hemisphere, and so the term April Fools was coined to mock people who continue to celebrate New Year's in late March. So that's where the term April Fools comes from. So in the Northern Hemisphere, they also refer to the autumn equinox as the fall equinox, because it marks the beginning of the season that they refer to as fall. We usually just use the term autumn. I think they also say autumn in the UK. I'm not sure. They also sometimes refer to it as the September equinox, obviously because it falls in September for them. I've never really heard anyone in the Southern Hemisphere refer to it as the March equinox, mostly because I never hear people talk about the equinoxes anyway, but I guess we'd otherwise refer to it as the March equinox. But I really like the term fall equinox actually, because it kind of captures the essence of the spiritual energy of the season. Because not only do the leaves fall in that season, but the daylight falls earlier and earlier, the deeper into the season that we go, until we reach the point of minimum daylight in the winter solstice. The word equinox, which I think I've mentioned in the spring equinox video, is derived from Latin. Equa meaning equal and nox meaning night, because the equinox is the only time of the year where the length of the day is equal to the length of the night. And this occurs twice a year, at the spring equinox and the fall equinox. These are the only 2 days in the year where the eclectic equator and the celestial equator converge. For us in the southern hemisphere, the autumn equinox is the day when the North Pole begins to tilt towards the sun, shifting us further away from the sun's rays, giving us shorter days and longer nights thereafter. The Great Pyramids of Giza were built in alignment with what we now call Orion's belt, which is associated with Osiris, which was originally referred to as Asa by our ancestors in Kemet, which essentially means that those pyramids are monuments of Asa. The spring equinox for both the southern and the northern hemisphere align the sun with the pyramids of Giza, marking the new year for both hemispheres, although this happens on 2 separate equinoxes for the northern and the southern hemisphere. So each equinox essentially either marks a new year or the halfway point of a year. So the sun aligns with the pyramids on both the spring equinox and the fall equinox. In Kemet, they had lined the Great Pyramids of Giza with moonstone that would catch the sun's rays directly during the equinoxes, and the crystal would reflect a light that would shine for thousands of miles, marking the time of equinox. Not to be repetitive, because I know I've mentioned this in the spring equinox video as well, but they are tons of sites around the world built in honor or to mark the equinoxes and the solstices. Machu Picchu in Peru has the Intihuatana stone, which is a precise indicator of the date of the two equinoxes. Intihuatana, directly translated to English, means foretying the sun. I would list a few more, but I don't want to be too repetitive. You can check out the spring equinox video for more information on more sites around the world that mark the equinoxes. The Great Pyramids of Giza are the grandest site of this nature in the world, still being studied to this day. So when the fall equinox occurs, what's happening is that we're transitioning from the season of Gep to the season of Oset. I will explain the nature of both seasons in upcoming videos. In more mainstream terms, we're moving from the season of Virgo to the season of Libra. The fall equinox marks the beginning of the Oset/Libra season. And Oset season begins the journey of shorter days and longer nights. This is where we begin to experience the darkness of winter. Although I do have to say that period of darkness is not as drastic in Southern Africa because of where we're placed on the Earth's axis. There are places that experience much longer nights and a much colder climate. So spiritually, the fall equinox marks the day of departure between Asa and Oset. And these two lovebirds are represented in many spiritual cultures by the sun and the moon. The most important thing to remember here is that Kemetic spirituality always likened every occurrence in nature to the cycle of creation, because everything on Earth is in a constant cycle of death and rebirth. This cycle is perpetuated in nature and therefore in the spiritual system of the gods. All aspects of it can be found within the deity system that is detailed in the creation story. The creation story narrates the family of the 9 gods in Heliopolis that I speak about in the creation story video. The story narrates the demise and death of Asa and the mourning of his wife Oset and her sister Nepthet before the two sisters resurrect him and his spirit returns to them and to the land of Kemet. So this period, the autumn equinox or the fall equinox, marks the death of Asa and the mourning of Oset. This is a time where we tend to see a lot of heavy rains, and those rains in a lot of our African spiritual cultures and our ancient spiritual cultures would represent the tears of Oset, and the extended darkness would be a consequence of his departure. And the general period of darkness throughout fall, throughout winter, would be used as a time of regeneration, reflection, shadow work, just immense and crucial spiritual transformation. The energy of this equinox is quite opposite to the spring equinox. It's not really a time to party. Also physically, like we can feel it in the climate, it's more funerally than celebratory. Asa was often referred to as the green god in Kemet, but this is a time when he transitioned from being the green god to being the black god. In Kemetic scripture, he basically becomes a shadow, and reflected upon the individual, it represents our own shadows. And by shadow, I mean the hidden parts of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that we keep in the darkness. So this is the time to essentially retreat into that darkness, to nurture those parts of ourselves, to heal them, to learn more about them, to nurture them and to heal them. This withdrawal period was written about in Kemet and Kemetic scripture as a return to the creative forces, to source, a return to source, withdrawing from the outside world to go within. That kind of spiritual isolation acts as a compass to finding your path. It's a regeneration of the mind, body, and soul. Generally, if you're looking to tap into the energy of this equinox, some of the physical tools that were used according to ancient rituals were crystals like lapis lazuli, turquoise. They also used alabaster. They used gold and silver, and the incense that they used was myrrh. These were the main items that were placed on the altar, as well as 2 bowls of water and a fresh loaf of bread. So if you have an altar, or even better, if you have a collective altar for the family, these are some of the things that can go on there to align with the energy of this cosmic event. You can also check out the Sacred Magic of Ancient Egypt to get more details on this ceremony and other ceremonies and rituals and events, solar events, cosmic events. That book, and I always say this, it's an extensive guide of the science of Kemetic spirituality. I love it. It's one of my main references forever and always. I've learned so much from it, and I highly recommend it for everybody. But to put it quite simply, the fall equinox isn't something that's complicated to prepare for. Because of the nature of the cosmic event, it's a really good day to simply relax and have dinner with the family or on your own. It does carry the energy of isolation and calm and reflection and healing. It's a really great time to withdraw and focus on what it is that you need to heal, what it is that your mind needs to heal, what your body needs to heal, what your spirit is in need of to heal. It's a really good time to withdraw away from friends. It's got that hermit energy. For those of you who like tarot, this is a time that carries a lot of hermit energy, and that's one of my favorite cards in the tarot deck, because hermit energy is immensely healing, because that is an energy that removes distractions and it removes influence. It's about you and who you are, finding yourself again, remembering who you are, uncovering parts of yourself maybe that have been dormant for a while, getting back into old hobbies that used to bring you joy, zoning in on the things that you love that maybe you've neglected because they haven't really fit into your social life or your work life. It's about coming back to yourself and prioritizing yourself and prioritizing your mind, body, and soul, what it is that you need to heal and to fall in love with life again. It's about stopping and reevaluating your reason for living. What is it that keeps you going? What is it that motivates you? I generally love to spend this time alone. I go into deep hermit mode. This is when I do most of my thinking and reflecting, and this is the time that allows me to take a few steps back, recuperate, and plan for the future. My only and main advice in this time is to take it easy. Don't force things. This is the time that it kind of forces you to take a few steps back, and it's got like that Mercury retrograde energy that forces you to take a few steps back. The energy supports you taking a few steps back, which then allows you to have the momentum to launch yourself forward. So don't fight it, just surrender to it and allow it to do its thing. Because ultimately, if you are in alignment or if you're working towards aligning, then everything is working together in your favor all the time. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I will see you in the next video very soon. Lots of love, lots of light. Take care of yourself.